Good evening and welcome to the Town Council's Community Resources Committee meeting. This meeting will be held under the regulations allowing local authorities to meet formally using remote technology. It is being streamed live and is available to view on our website. It is important for everyone participating in this meeting to keep your microphones on mute and when you are not on mute when you are not speaking, to reduce disruption from background noise. Most decisions will be made by the general assent of those present. However, if a vote is required, each councillor's name will be read out by myself or the assistant town clerk, and you'll be asked to state whether you are for, against, or abstaining. This meeting has exempt and non-exempt business, and because the second half of the meeting is confidential, the live streaming of the meeting will stop when the exempt business begins. Members will then reconvene in a private session to continue the meeting. If at any time the Town Council's technology fails and we need to adjourn the meeting for a short period, I will confirm this and ask all those present to turn their cameras off and mute their microphones whilst the problem is rectified. I will then confirm when the meeting resumes. We can only monitor our technology and cannot halt the meeting if a member of the press or public experiences technological issues. I will now ask the town clerk to carry out, the assistant town clerk to carry out a roll call of all councillors and ask you to confirm that you're present. Thank you. Over to our wonderful assistant town clerk.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Blanchard Cooper.
Yes, I am present.
Councillor Malloy.
Present.
Councillor Tandy.
Present.
Councillor Turner.
Present.
Councillor Dr. Walsh.
Present.
And Councillor Chase.
Present.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Moving on to the agenda, item 1, mobile phones. Members are reminded to switch their mobile phone devices to silent for the duration of the meeting. And where possible, I just remind people, if you can silence your landlines, that would be useful as well these days. Item 2, apologies. I will ask the assistant town clerk to read the names of those who have sent their apologies tonight. Jules, do we have any apologies?
Thank you, Chair. Just Councillor Seeks.
Thank you ever so much. Moving on to the next item, which is item 3, declarations of interest. The standing declarations are noted. Members and officers are reminded to make any other declarations if they become apparent at the appropriate time during the meeting. Are there any further declarations? First of all, I will just chuck my own personal one in. So in view of my close personal connections with the Society, as a member of the Town Council's representative on their committee, I declare a personal and prejudicial interest in the matter relating to the Bonfire Society and confirm I will leave the meeting when this committee comes to consider this item. And I'll thank Councillor Tandy in advance, who will take over the chair for this discussion. Do we have any other declarations? No.
Yes, I think I probably better make a declaration in respect of the visitor maps, because there's a reference to Arran District Council and its possible role in that, and as I'm a leader of Arran District Council, I declare a personal interest in that.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh, and I suppose myself as a member of Arran District Council, which has already been in the note, but I'll redeclare it as a personal interest. Anyone else? No. Okay, we'll move on to item 4, minutes. If you turn to pages 4 to 9 in your agendas, you will find the minutes from the meeting of the 22nd of October 2020. If everyone is happy with the minutes, these will be approved and arrangements made for me to sign them at a later date. This will be reflected in the minutes of the meeting. Is everyone happy with these? I'm sure everyone's had a good chance to read these, as these were sent out last week. I'll just give everyone a moment in case anyone's wanting to raise anything. No.
Agreed.
Right, lovely. All else happy to agree those? I'll just wait for a couple of voices.
Agreed.
Wonderful. Thank you ever so much. Okay, so moving on to item 5. So, Chair's report on urgent items. I will hand over to the Assistant Town Clerk to confirm if there are any urgent items, of which I believe there is one. So, over to Jules. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just for members, an update I have. Some members may have seen in the press that avian flu has arrived in the UK, and a directive has recently been issued by the Chief Veterinary Officer introducing stricter controls on the keeping of poultry and captive birds. These come into force from the 14th of December and basically require all keepers to keep poultry indoors to try and stop the infectious disease. We do have some poultry that are kept on our allotment sites, Chair. So the Town Council is working with Lauga and taking steps to alert all those allotment holders affected, and we'll be introducing signage and monitoring activity on all our sites, publishing details of the government guidance that's available. That's just for members to note, Chair.
Thank you, Jules. Can I just ask that any members of the allotment subcommittee are just kept in the loop of anything that evolves around the allotment sites and those affected? Which I'm sure you would have done anyway.
Will do. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so item 6, public forum. In accordance with the remote meetings protocol, which has been introduced by the Town Council, any members of the public wishing to address the Council or any of its committees during remote meetings should have emailed their submissions to us one clear day before the meeting. I will ask the Assistant Town Clerk once again to advise if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. There's 2 representations that we've received regarding items on tonight's agenda. The first is from Mr. Derek Chester, who asks, please provide a clear explanation as to how, after both national lockdowns, Rustington Museum was able to open with normal hours and without pre-booking on the first legal date, yet still Littlehampton Museum is only available one day a week by pre-booking. Does the council not realise the contradiction in continually promoting people to come here and shop, yet the one attraction that is responsible for in the town centre remains largely unavailable? And if I may, Chair, in response, we thank Mr. Chester for his question. Following the introduction of the new tiered restrictions, the museum, like all museums in the sector, reviewed its risk assessment prior to reopening, as well as consulting the most up-to-date guidance from the DCMS, that's the Department of Culture, Media and Sport in Government. Our risk assessment of this activity highlighted that the biggest challenge facing us has been the configuration of the museum, visitor dwell time in the museum, and that it shares its entrance with the main reception area, and balancing this with the social distancing rules for a museum in a tier 2 area. This review also took into consideration our experience of fully reopening the Manor House reception over the last few months. The review established that free flow opening is not appropriate due to the small gallery spaces, multiple pinch points, and the lack of a feasible one-way system. A booking system would, however, ensure that the museum visitors of no more than one household as prescribed in the current restrictions are able to visit, and that there are no problems or clashes with arrivals in the reception area. Considering the safety of both visitors and staff within the resources available to us, the booking system provides the best way for us of regulating visitor numbers, whilst maintaining an open reception under the current restrictions. This risk assessment was approved by the Town Clerk as the Town Council's designated Health and Safety Officer, and the museum has reopened for one day a week with pre-booked visits for the period leading up to Christmas. Just want to assure everybody that we are ready and keen to reopen full-time once the restrictions permit, and that we continue to keep this under review.
Thank you, Jules.
The next representation is from Janet Crossley. She has asked, please could you consult local artists, gallery owners and schools if any new artwork is to be considered anywhere in Littlehampton. Certainly it would be considerably better than the horrid sticky pictures and value for money. Also, as local people, they would do work that is relevant, appropriate and beautiful. In response, Chair, we thank Ms Crossley for her comments, which I'm sure the committee will bear in mind when they come to the relevant item on the agenda.
Thank you, Jill. So I'm sure we'll all just note those for now, and thank you for those responses. Moving on to item 7, officers' reports. So if I could ask you to please turn to page 10 in your agenda papers, and I'll ask both the Town Clerk and Assistant Town Clerk to take us through these reports. So over to Peter. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The first one, which I'll deal with, is events. Hopefully members have read the report. Can I draw members' attention to the fact there are 3 recommendations that actually do need a decision in the report? The first relates to the need to cancel the charity, rather sadly, to cancel the charity Pancake Olympics in February. The second relates to doing another session of the Out and About activities in Rosemade at the cost of an additional £100. And the third relates to something requested by the committee at its last meeting, which is the options available to us should the pandemic continue. I mean, fingers crossed it won't, Chair. And we will be able to run events during the summer. But as I think you quoted to me earlier, the discussion we had 12 months ago, we didn't know what was happening then. So I'm happy to answer questions on anything in the report, but there are 3 recommendations there, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Peter. So I think it would be sensible. We've got 3 recommendations, as you say, and I think it would be sensible to take questions on each one separately. So the first one was relating to the Pancake Olympics. Does anyone have any questions or comments? I see Councillor Michelle Malloy would like to ask a question.
Oh no, sorry, I put my cue in too early. My question is about another paragraph.
Okay, I'll wait for that then. Does anyone have anything in relation to the Pancake Olympics? We have a recommendation which is to sadly cancel this event, and I'm just waiting to see if anyone pops up with a question. Councillor Walsh, I can see you waving.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chairman. Sadly, I think we've got no choice but to do this, because even if the vaccination programme is rolling out, as it is rolling out, it's not going to have that significant effect by February, and I don't think we're going to be in the position that the restrictions will be eased sufficiently to do that. So I think, sad though it is, that we've got to take this early decision to do that. So I support it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Walsh. I think you've expressed my sentiments exactly. It is a shame, because it's one of our smaller events, but it is one of our most fun, dare I say, silly and daft events that the town does look forward to, and it's a great way to actually, and it was pretty much introduced to highlight some of the great groups that we've got in the town. So it is, I feel, a personal shame. I've always liked taking part in it, but I do feel this is sensible. No one else has raised to ask any questions, so can I just ask that the committee are content with this? James has already shown that he's happy with this one. Is anyone else?
Sorry, I do have a question. It just wasn't about the Pancake Olympics.
No, I just want to check on the Pancake Olympics.
Oh, okay.
We're going to move on to the next bit. So does anyone have any questions, or is everyone happy with the recommendation regarding the Pancake Olympics?
I'm happy to agree with it. I'm not happy to agree with it, but I agree with it.
Quite.
Sorry.
Okay. So I think that's general assent that we're all content with that one. The second one is the Easter Out and About. Am I correct on that, Peter? Yes.
Absolutely.
Right, so the Easter Out and About, we normally do, I got slightly confused myself in this earlier. The Easter Out and About, we do 2 sessions at the moment at 2 different parts. So this would be to introduce a 3rd session into the Rosemade open space, or Rosemade Park, which the whole thing normally costs £700, so this would be to add an extra £100 to facilitate one extra session as part of our celebrations almost, for reopening and having all the extra wonderful new equipment that everyone's worked hard to get in place. So, are there any questions relating to this first? Michelle, was your question relating to this one?
No, it's right at the end.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have any questions relating to this? No? Okay, in which case, I think this is personally quite a good one, so hopefully everyone's happy with this. Can I just ask, is everyone happy to lend their support to this one?
Agreed.
That.
Agreed.
Wonderful. Okay, so, oh, and that was David at the end. Thank you, David. So, yes, so that one is approved. So the third one was
As set out in Appendix 1, Chair.
Appendix 1, thank you. So the event options proposals.
Yes.
Okay, so I was trying to think some wording for this. I'm happy with this, except, so if everyone's can turn to page 13, the events options. So in option 3, it states a limited remote events program will be delivered as this does little to meet the aims of live events. In these circumstances, the events program would largely resemble what was delivered last year. I'd like to just amend that slightly if the committee is content, to the last sentence. In these circumstances, the events program would largely resemble what was delivered last year at the most cost-effective method. My reason for this is I'll give one example. Is we've done 2 quizzes which I've hosted. One of them was a higher cost to produce. The second one was literally myself filming from home, and they both turned out very well. So I think to safeguard public money, if we can just have it in there so that we do it in the most cost-effective possible way, because with virtual events we can do all sorts of things and we're all learning every day. So is everyone happy with that amendment first?
Well, Chairman, sorry to be pedantic, can I suggest that instead of the phrase delivered this year or last year, we actually put delivered in 2020? So it's quite clear what we're talking about.
Yes, I'm happy with that. I don't think anyone's looking at me and scared.
Councillor Tandy has indicated he wishes to speak, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Tandy.
Thank you, Chair. Mine is not specifically on the amendment, but it is linked to the event option proposal,
Yep.
Specifically option 2, which, given the current trajectory with vaccines, is probably, if all goes well, the one we're likely to fall into, because restrictions aren't going to disappear straight away. There is reference to town council events are not ticketed, and it's difficult to limit capacity. Now, given that, like I said, I suspect capacity limits is likely to be something that remains as a restriction, are we looking at the possibility of introducing some form of ticketing? I accept it would be difficult because it's public space, but there are other like venues that we could use where we could at least try and restrict the numbers coming in, because I think that might be a good balance. So just if something could be done to look into that as a possibility. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and very good point, actually. I'll just check what the question is from Councillor Malloy before we come back on those, if that's okay, in case it's a similar type of point. Councillor Malloy.
It was very similar. I was wondering why we're dismissing ticketing events when actually it's not too difficult to ticket an event if once you've got a fenced in area, and we've got schools around and stuff with fields that are fenced in, and you don't have to sell tickets on Eventbrite and places like that. People literally just register for a ticket and then it gets scanned on the way in, which would also double up as seeing who's there for the track and trace system as well.
Okay, thank you. So Peter, would you have any, or Jules?
Yeah, I'm quite happy to come back on that. I mean, that is leaving that option open, and I totally pick up both Councillor Malloy and Councillor Tandy's point. What I would say, the counterbalance to that, is that some things that we do don't lend themselves to it. The one that is potentially a possibility is screen on the green, although it wouldn't be screen on the green. It would be screen somewhere else. So that's the one that is the most likely to be able to switch. By the time we get to the town show, we hope that, because it's an outdoor event, we'd hope to be able to keep that. What we'd then have to do is be more concerned about the areas that are enclosed and limit, and we could do that by simple stewarding and keeping people in and out and keeping people moving outside. The Armed Forces Day, again, is a bit of a spread. It's difficult to know whether we could do that by ticket or not. And it's a bit earlier, and that's the one that perhaps causes the most of the bigger events, the one that's perhaps the most difficult to pitch. So I think the straight answer is that Screen on the Green is definitely a possibility. I know that sounds a bit contradictory, but it's definitely a possibility that we could look at a venue to ticket that is enclosed. What we can't have is, for a number of reasons, is problems with ticketing. So we haven't got the mechanism, so we'd have to bring it in to do it. We haven't got those sort of things on board. Not obviously getting a ticket, but in terms of properly ticketing people in, doing track and trace and the rest of it. So we'd have to check those through. But the possibility is certainly there.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Just a clarification, do we need to try and reword that slightly on option 2 then to reflect that we would be looking, where possible, to allow ticketed where possible? I think I'm asking this to you, Peter, really, because I'm just looking at the wording. It does I see where the councillors are saying, and I do think it does look a little bit like we're saying we don't.
Yeah, I don't think it's meant to exclude it in that wording, but I think we could just pick it up through the minute, Chair, rather than trying to change anything there. We'll pick it up in a minute, and I'll just feed back to the events team.
Okay,
that there is that possibility needs to be brought into play.
Cool. Wonderful. Okay, so we can make sure it's minuted that we're going to explore ticketing as well. Does anyone else have any questions on that? No? Okay, was everyone happy with the slight adjustment to the wording that I've put forward for option 3? I'm not seeing anyone say no. James said yes.
No objection.
Wonderful. In which case, are we all content to support the appendix for the third allocation? Allocation? Apologies. Where did I get that from? For the third recommendation.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Yeah. Okay.
Agreed.
Thank you ever so much, all. That's agreed. Okay, where am I?
Well, through you, Chair. The only other thing is, if members have got questions on any other part of the report.
Yep. Has anyone got any questions on anything else on there? No. Okay, we'll move on then to the next item.
Sorry, Pilly. Can I just say that I'd like to congratulate everybody in the events group for the events that they were able to manage to take place. In particular, the Remembrance Sunday event. I think they did extremely well, and to have got 1,800 people watching the virtual service, I think was amazing. So if through the chair and through the council we can say congratulations to everybody, I think it was very, very well handled. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. I think that's very well said. I'm sure everyone here agrees with that. Our events team do a wonderful job in our best years, let alone this year, which has got to be not one of our best for events in a traditional sense, but certainly one of our best years for coming up with something different. So yes, thank you ever so much for raising that, Councillor
Turner.
Sorry, my brain went dead for a moment. Apologies.
Who am I?
Yes, sorry. I could have just plugged it on screen and gone, the screen's frozen.
Thank you, Chair. I'll feed that back to the team who've had an interesting year, as you quite rightly say, and those comments from committee will be well received, I'm sure.
Okay, thank you. So I'll just add notification come through. One moment. Okay, so just making sure I was up to date on that. Right, moving on then. What's on next one? Lost my place. So 7.2 museum periodic report. So I'm going to hand over to the lovely Jules for this.
Thank you very much, Chair. Members have got the usual periodic report that's presented to the committee of museum activity. Take it that members have read the detail that they've got before them, and just a couple of things to highlight. First of all, this year has been our first virtual exhibition, which went live last week and is on the website and has been very well received so far. We have also been experiencing a good increase in terms of interest in volunteering, which has been very welcome to as those volunteers come on board. They're able to help with the work of the museum and hopefully become more involved as time goes on. We keep this under review as guidance changes. The virtual engagement and outreach has also been quite popular, and there's been a good take up there, and we're also making good progress, I'm pleased to report, with the collections documentation project. A little disappointing that we failed in our recent grant bid, but that's more a reflection of how competitive it is to get these types of grants now. As you can imagine, there are many museums that are competing for these monies, so the team continue to investigate those opportunities, and as and when they come forward, we'll keep the committee informed. As mentioned during the public forum session, we are on a limited opening at the moment, and just to reassure members that we keep that under review, risk assessments up to date, and we will respond to the changes in guidance as they happen. In terms of recommendations, other than noting the report and the progress with the Museum Action Plan, there's a couple of acquisitions there that the curator is recommending we accept into the collection, as we don't have those already. And finally, there's a proposal in there, and again, this is subject to the restrictions and how they look next year. Regarding the Butterworth Gallery, what we'd like to do is close that off for a period in the early part of the new year and use the reference books that we've got in the collection to create a reference library. And I mentioned the restrictions, but we would need to bear those in mind when it comes to moving those items down and then preparing it so that the public can use it. But we do need the committee's approval to make that temporary closure for the period of January and February next year, so that that work can start. Other than that, happy to take any questions, Chair.
Okay, thank you much, Jules. So the first question I have comes from Councillor Walsh.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you, Billy. I'm particularly excited about the changes to the Butterworth Gallery. I think Roger Butterworth, late Roger, would have been very, very pleased with this, because it's exactly sort of stuff that he was keen and did. So it's the most sensible nominative determinism. Sorry, that sounds an awful mouthful, but the clue is in the name. It's what Roger would have wanted. It also means that so much more of the research that a lot of local people want, and other people from further afield want to do, can be done without tying up museum staff too much. They can come self-service and get on and do it. So I think this is really exciting. It also introduces a much greater interactivity between the public and researchers and the museum, and that they will be positively encouraged, and it'll be easy to do. So I fully support this and really welcome it wholeheartedly. Great. And the other thing I want to pay tribute to is the museum staff. That it looks like we're going to actually hit our accessioning up to date in this coming year. It looks like we'll reach the 30,000 target, if that graph looks correct. Yeah, okay, keeping our fingers crossed, I agree. But it's a splendid achievement to have got so far, and you know, they're nearly there now. So it's a thank you, but also just a final pat on the back to finish it during the coming year. Thank you. Again, it just means that everything will be much more readily identifiable to researchers and to visitors, that if there's something specific they want to look for or to have produced for them, it's not on public display, that can happen much more easily, and along with the digitalization, which actually safeguards it all for the future as well. So tribute and thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. I don't seem to have any other questions on screen at the moment, so if any other councillors do, can I please ask you to pop your cues in the sidebar? Just whilst I'm waiting, if anyone does have any, I would just like to echo actually what Councillor Walsh has said, particularly regarding the documentation project. As some will know, it was something myself and a previous councillor, I think it was Derek Chester, were very keen on. And whilst, yes, the museum hasn't been able to open, if you look at that graph, which is on page 18 of your packs, the first graph, you can see that it was quite clear in April that when everything started with COVID, that project obviously went down quite considerably. However, you can see from that, compared to the previous years, how much effort has been made, that whilst, yes, it isn't open, the museum team and staff are doing everything they can to still achieve. And it means we're getting lots achieved in relation to that project, which is, in the long term, a huge asset for the museum, because it will open doors to being able to present things very differently and much quicker and easier for all involved as well. So a huge thank you for them for that, because I can imagine it's a very laborious and tedious job. So I'm very pleased that they're still managing to get through it all. I don't think I would have. I think I would have pulled my hair out by now. So thank you ever so much. No other questions have come up. So I'm going to go through the recommendations. So if I can just say, recommendation 1 is to consider and comment on the proposals for the change of use for the Butterworth Gallery, and approve the temporary closure of the gallery during January and February. Can I check are all content with that, please? Councillor Walsh?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I thought you was asking a question.
No, agreed.
That's great. All agreed? Okay. Item 2, note the museum update, progress with the collection documentation project and updated action plan. All agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Wonderful. And I'm sure you'll all join us all in saying congratulations to them for doing such a great job on that part, particularly. Item 3, consider the recommendation acquisitions of the items listed in item 5, which is on page 19, which both, I have to say, having a collection of carnival photos myself, I personally haven't seen that one. I'm not sure about the other item, but I would certainly recommend that myself on those. So is everyone content with that?
Agreed.
Wonderful. And finally, otherwise, just to note the report. So on that note, we can move on to item 7.3, the museum staffing, on pages 25 to 29. And I will once again hand you over to Jules.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, can I just say thank you very much to the committee for their comments. I'm sure if Charlotte was here, she would say to me, don't forget, we've also had the support of our volunteers and other members of staff as well in the town council. So it's been a really good team effort all round. Thank you for those comments.
Thank you to everyone involved then.
Turning to the item on the agenda, this relates to the museum staffing review, and just a reminder really, the report gives a brief outline of the background to this, but as you mentioned before, the collections documentation project that came out of the member working group that the previous administration ran to look into the working practices of the museum and how that might be improved. part of the recommendations coming out of that working group was that the staffing structure for the museum be reviewed. Particularly, the aim was to ensure that museum staffing resources in the future were both able and trained and flexible enough to cover a wide variety of work, and that training be provided where necessary. So as a result of that, we've undertaken a review, and the timing has been quite specific on this because the project itself was time limited, and that falls within the post that was temporarily created, the Collections Documentation Officer. And that's a fixed term post that comes to an end when the project comes to an end next March. The previous structure that we were working with had seen many part-time working arrangements, and one advantage that we had during that period was that others joined us temporarily and gave us a different perspective on the service. And this has highlighted the need for flexibility in our workforce, as well as updating our systems, policies and practice. So with the project coming to an end and the primary objective close to being achieved now, we've done that review, and one of the key things we've had to address is looking at how the museum works with the rest of the services in the Town Council to achieve the aims and objectives that we're set strategically, and also to ensure that we are able to attract the right staff to meet the professional museum accreditation standards that are expected. The key changes are that our structure will, once the fixed term post comes to an end, revert to how it was before. So in terms of costs, there aren't any implications for the committee to consider on a financial basis. The post, we are looking at changing a description of it. At the moment, we've got Archives and Exhibition Officer. We're proposing to change that name to Museum Officer, which better reflects how the industry now operates, but encompasses the main changes that have been made to make that post take in all of that is expected, and gives us the flexibility. For example, we have part-time working arrangements, but we can go out and recruit staff on a more holistic basis. So there's no other changes that the committee are asked to consider. The revised structure is on Appendix 2. We're asking the committee here to recommend that updated structure to Property and Personnel, who will also receive a similar report but be asked to endorse that new structure. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you ever so much, Jules. Do we have any questions? I've not got any on screen at the moment. I'll just wait for a second. In which case, is everyone content to note the report?
That recommendation will go to Property and Personnel if members are happy, Chair.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Anyone else?
Agreed.
Lovely. Okay, that is agreed. So I'll move on to item 7.4, Community Resources Periodic Report, pages 30 to 35. Once again, I'm sorry, Jules, I'll be handing back over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. No problem at all there. The bulk of the report, I take it that members have read. It is to note, but I will briefly update members regarding the opening of the new play facilities at Rosemade. We have had to postpone the event we were hoping to hold this weekend, and that's because of delays in the supply of the new fencing. As a result, members will see that the surfacing has been attended to, and a lot of the frames for the equipment are in there, but the bulk of the fittings have yet to be done, and they won't be until that fencing is in place. The event that had been planned this weekend was planned in line with the Tier 2 restrictions, so attached to the report is an urgent action, which I do need to ask the committee to note, just to ensure that we met the restrictions in having that opening, because it would be limited and not quite what we would have done under different circumstances. But everything will be reviewed again in accordance with the restrictions that are in place at the time. We're expecting announcements next week, and hopefully we'll be able to confirm the date shortly. As I said, the remainder of the report is is there for members to note, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you ever so much, Jules. I have to say, I'm looking forward to the day when we don't have the words restrictions used in meetings quite so much.
Yeah.
I have two questions appeared on screen. So the first one comes from Councillor Walsh. You're muted, James.
Yes, thank you very much indeed, Chairman. Mine's on the tree survey and future works. Can I just be assured that these include the Rosemade West Boundary macrocarpus, which we need to do something about before they're blown down in the next big gale? Yeah.
Absolutely, Chair. They are actually quite robust. The detail that I am
Everybody says that until they're blown down, yes.
Well, indeed, and I'm constantly surprised because obviously we monitor that area on a daily basis anyway. But the key element to this is that they are actually healthy. It is going to take some effort to remove and replace them. So I'm waiting for cost information and also some advice in terms of appropriate native species that we could replace them with. So that's the information that I'm aiming to bring back to committee for the next meeting.
The reason I ask is it isn't just the robustness of them, it's the appearance on what will become the main road into Littlehampton with the when all the limits to bypasses. So we're looking to two years down the line. I know that, although that road, of course, will be working long before that between the A259 and East Street. With the works that are currently underway, so we do need to get on that because it's just a grotty appearance, and new native species trees there will enhance the area and actually improve the effectiveness of the trees.
Thank you, James. I couldn't agree more. They're not the most wonderful, and I appreciate some people out there may love them. But in the overall look of that whole area, I think there's something much nicer to be had for there. So hopefully we'll keep trying to progress with that.
The space.
You've gone on mute, James.
Sorry.
Oh,
no,
sorry.
There we are. The space is so big that we can have big native species trees like oak, beech, and such like, plain, there we are.
Yeah, thank you, James.
That's all noted, Chair. My only caution is it comes at a price, but we'll come back to you with that, certainly.
Thank you. Okay, the second question comes from Councillor Malloy.
Hello. I don't know if mine's a question or a request. It's about our priorities. We've got a splash pad on there. I did email back in September about it because obviously the sooner we get it done, the better with people looking to holiday at home and stay within their own town. I was wondering if we could kind of put it through as one of our more important priorities, because I heard that at district they're also discussing about putting one in at Bognor, and I don't know, I know we've got district councillors on here, I don't know if it would affect our priorities if we then requested to have one in Littlehampton, that district would want so many splash pads on all their lands.
Okay, thank you, Malloy, Councillor Malloy. I'm not sure how to respond to that one, in all honesty. Would you know, Jules or Peter?
Well, what I would say is that that's noted. First of all, it's resources. Our aim is to start moving on those priorities based on obviously Rosemade Park being completed. That's one thing. The key thing with those priorities is they are going to be dependent on the district council anyway, because in the main they are the landowner, so they are quite a key player. And that would be definitely part of the discussion. prioritising within that, I think we need to do more work first before we know where we are. So I'm not confident that we would get anything in place for the next summer season. I wouldn't want to make that promise here and now, but certainly we'll be looking into those as soon as we can next year.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jules. I see Peter's appeared on screen. Are you wishing to add to that, Peter?
Which only very briefly, because Juliet got to the bit I was going to say at the end bit, so I should have just kept quiet. But the splash pad won't be there next summer. It categorically can't be there next summer. There's just no way that it will be. What we'll be doing by coming back to members in the early spring and through spring is agreeing what they want to do from those priorities, the costs and the timescales. So if you then take on your splash pad, and because we've only got a limited staff resource to deliver these as well, so if you decide that the splash pad is you want to get it in summer 2022, then we need to crack on from that point in April. If, however, you decide that you want to do other things first, that will be the way that we work. But they all will be coming to you. All of those remaining priorities will be coming to members in the different committees over the next few months. So does that answer your question?
Sort of, yeah. I was just worried that if we don't put it in place at some point, then we could get a no from district for using any land, because they've got one going in potentially got one going in Bognor.
Yeah, the Bognor one doesn't really affect us because at the end of the day, we'd be the people paying for it. So
okay.
unless the leader of the district council is about to pop up and say, of course, he's got some money somewhere that he'd like to share with us, then actually it's our priority and we'd be paying for it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Michelle. I see James leaning in, so I'm going to give an opportunity just to speak on this.
Yeah, just by way of explanation, the one at Bognor Regis is a completion. I can't remember what stage it is of their public realm improvement works, similar to the ones we're doing in Littlehampton, and in the similar way to Littlehampton, not all the phases could be completed in Bognor Regis at the same time. It's entirely funded by grant money that's come from a government fund, for which obviously the district is very grateful, and it's on that basis. So it's not the question of the district council is choosing to fund one in Bognor Regis over Littlehampton. It's the completion of a long held scheme that's been progressing there, and Littlehampton public realm is what our public realm funding is going towards, and there isn't a splash pad included in that because the geography is different, as it were. Our linkages between the railway station, the shopping centre and the Riverside Walk, it isn't down to as far as the seafront, because the distance between the seafront and the town centre is a long way, whereas in Bognor Regis it's a couple of 100 metres.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. I will just add to that slightly in that there is, as Councillor Walsh quite rightly said, that the public realm improvements from ADC, Armagh District Council, only include that section. There is a separate document that it might be worth looking up online through the Armagh District Council website, Councillor Malloy, which is the 2017 seafront regeneration proposals, which I believe does include a splash pad, and is something that I believe I've mentioned, and I believe Councillor Seeks has also mentioned the district to try and get relooked at and revisited. So hopefully that will also clarify that for you. So thank you ever so much for your question, Councillor Malloy. Do we have anyone else, or are we? No, first of all, do we have any other questions? There's none appeared on screen yet. I'll just give you a second to get your cues on the screen. No. In which case, is everybody happy to? I believe this one was to note the report. Yes, it was. Are you all happy to note the report? I am.
Agreed.
Wonderful. Thank you ever so much. Okay, moving on to item 7.5, which is on pages 36 to 38. I'm going to ask Peter to summarise this report and the recommendations and hand back to myself. So over to you, Peter.
Thank you, Chair. The members will probably recall the discussion back in September, which is explained in the report. Shall we say it was unclear to me what it was that members actually wanted. So what I've done is come back to committee with a series of questions and a series of issues that members need to bear in mind. The one thing I haven't really stated in there is that no decision has been actually taken to move this ahead. All that's actually been agreed is to bring back, was asked for some details to this meeting. What I've actually done is come back to you and say, I don't know what it is that I'm trying to draw up proposals on. So on the second page of the report, there are a series of questions which the chair is going to take you through. At the end of that, I would ask that we'll either have a view, we'll have a view as to what it is that you want, but you also need to decide whether that just needs to then be put into a series of, into the town council's priorities and taken as within that batch, whether you want to crack on with it now, or whether you don't want to do it at all, or we don't want to do it. Sorry, there's a fourth option there as well. You don't want to do it yet. So the questions, hopefully at the end of that, will at least provide clarity, and I'll hand back to the chair to guide you through.
Okay, thank you ever so much, Peter, on this one. I wasn't here for the meeting when this was originally discussed, so this is quite fresh for me. So perhaps I'm seeing it through different eyes as well, which might be useful. So I do agree, if we're to progress with this, we need some clear ideas for this. So there's one of two ways I can do this. I can go through just the questions. I think the first thing I need to know is what do members want to achieve from this? So forget for one moment all the other questions in front of you. What is it that members want to achieve from this? And I would also just remind members that we have, I'm sure Peter will correct me if I'm wrong on this, on our strategic objectives, we also have a branding exercise that's on there, which this might also play into, as I'd be fearful of producing something which wouldn't meet the branding that we're then going to do the piece of work on. It's a bit like which one comes first, the chicken or the egg. Should we be doing the branding first that this then becomes part of, or do we want this as something sitting there separately? So I'd just first of all like to know, would members still like to go ahead to consider this item firstly?
Chair, just before anyone comes back, I say your camera's gone slightly on the blink.
Hang on. It's because I've got my light. Is that better? There we go. Thank you. It's very important that I'm well lit. Thank you. So I'm waiting to see if anyone's got any comments on this. Councillor Walsh is waving his hand.
I have a conflict, because although I think this is an extremely well-intentioned initiative, I think that we do have to take things one step at a time. And I think the first thing that we know is happening, and pretty soon now, I think we're hoping it'll start in March, is the public realm works, which are, you know, nearly £3.5 million of work, I think it is, going into the town centre. And I think we need to see that delivered, or close to delivering, seeing the final scheme, and see how that plays out in encouraging people to view the whole town centre and the link with the Riverside Walk as a whole. And as you rightly say, the branding is part of that. So my view is that although this is something that we may want to do, I think we need to do it in a joined up way, but staged, you know, 1, 2, 3. So I think the public realm works, which is the biggest part of it and the most expensive part of it, let's see how what the final design looks like, and then when it begins to be delivered in March. I'm not sure what the timing for the branding at the moment is, but I think that is on the stocks, as it were. And my view is that that comes before maps and things like that, because clearly we don't want to do the maps and then doesn't fit with the branding and have to redo them because it doesn't work quite well. So I think my view is that it needs to be reconsidered in, I don't know, 6, 9, 12 months time, depending on the public realm works and the branding. That's my view, rather than actually saying, yes, great idea, let's press the button tonight and start doing it.
Thank you, Dr. Walsh. Before I go to the next question, what I will say is, regardless of what we decide, whether to go ahead or not, I will still go through all of the questions, because they can still, the information is still then useful for the future. So that even if we did say, no, we're going to just wait for a little bit, we've then got the information there for the clarity, which I'm sure, Peter, that would help you as well, wouldn't it?
What I would say to help you, Chair, if you were to, in effect, defer it and put it into and agreed that you were going to put it into our priorities, so therefore it could get picked up that way and in the right place and time, I could probably get the answers to these by writing to members rather than spending half an hour at committee if you wanted, and then bring back to committee what it is at the right time
to be finalised and agreed.
The composite sort of paper.
Okay, thank you ever so much, Peter. Okay, so I do have a couple more questions. So first of all, Councillor Malloy.
Hello. I think this is something we should look at, but if we're doing a rebranding, then definitely after we've done the rebranding to tie it in. And the way I see it is not having individual little maps. I don't think that's going to be any good to us. I see it as one big art piece in town and possibly one big art piece on the seafront. So you've just got the two pieces for people to take a picture on their phone, because that's what a lot of people do now, and make it quite fun. But I think it is something we need. But I do think if we are rebranding stuff, then we do need to wait till we're rebranded.
Okay, thank you ever so much. I've just been informed that you keep losing my image, so apologies, but hopefully you'll still get my voice. So apologies to any public that are very disappointed not to see me. So thank you for that, Councillor Malloy. I'll move on to the next question, which is from Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Chair. I'm quite happy I can see you and I haven't lost you at all. I think the map idea is an extremely good idea, and I think it's something that Council has to take forward. However, I also agree with Councillor Dr. Walsh that with rebranding and the town centre being done, I think we should defer this until that time. I have to say I don't entirely agree with Councillor Malloy. I think we need to have the maps on a stand in different locations along the seafront, because some people will go to the Norfolk Park car park and some will go to the Wave car park, and so we need to have suggestions and maps of where certain locations are for those people. In particular, you know, identifying where the toilets are and where there are tea rooms and where they can buy ice cream. They won't necessarily be in one place along the seafront, they'll be in different places. So I think we need to look at different locations for the map. I'm not saying that we should have a big map as well, but we should have a smaller map at different locations along the front. But I certainly think we should delay it until we get the rebranding done and include it as part of the rebranding. Thank you.
Thank you ever so much, Councillor Turner, for those comments. I'll move on to Councillor Chase. Good evening, David.
Good evening. Yeah, I support mapping fully. Totally get it with the rebranding. I don't know the timescale on the rebranding, but I do feel that as soon as we can start some investigating work, putting things together behind the scenes, then as soon as the rebranding's done, we can start to push. We can push the button and start on aspects of it, and we could start off with like an idea of two main ones in main points, then add to it in stages with learning what we've missed out, what we could put in another place in smaller concepts.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Chase. Do we have any other comments, please? No.
Can I just come back on? Can I very briefly come back on the points that members have made, which I think are very sensible, as always. What I can do though, if given that time span, and what me and colleagues can do, is that, for instance, I can go out to you with a much more open question here about what is it that you'd like, and that can get back several options, which have even been mentioned, even at this meeting, on just in the short term, and then go back out to members again. We can do that consultation as to what they prefer, and then bring that report back to committee in due course, so we can get a more composite feel on that. Because there will be, it's one of those questions. I mean, there's a question on there: how much do you want to spend? It's a good question, but someone might be thinking we ought to be doing this for less than £1,000, and someone might be thinking it's the most important capital project that we could do. So we need to eke those out. If we're going to do it this way, we get the opportunity to do so, Chair. So I'm happy to take that forward if that's what members wish.
That's great. Thank you, Peter. So I think based on the comments we've had, I would suggest that the committee seems quite content that what we do is, rather than going through these questions now, that Peter sends out some sort of questionnaire or gathers the information electronically or some other method, and that we don't park it, but we defer it to be done streamlined, so it comes in after the rebranding project, and that becomes part of the what's the word? Part of our
priorities.
No, part of our priorities. That's the word I was looking for. Thank you. So don't you hate it when the word just will not come into your head? So can I just check, is that all okay, Peter, for your side, firstly, if we go down that route? And
Yes,
that we then don't need to go through all these questions.
Yeah, absolutely fine, Chair. And what we will do is obviously come back to the public session of committee in due course. But it does give us that chance to evolve it into be absolutely clear what it is we're trying to do.
That's brilliant. Thank you.
And with other projects.
Okay, I am just going to ask, just so that there's no confusion or anything like this, can we just go through each name just to check that everyone is content with what I've just proposed? I'm not doing it as an official proposal, but just so that each member has said yes or no, just so that we clarified that. So, Jules, would you be okay to?
Yeah, certainly, Chair. I can call names.
Thank you ever so much. So, does anyone want clarification first on what we are not voting on, but just checking that everyone's happy with? No.
Do we have a timescale for the rebranding?
The rebranding, sorry, through you, Chair. The rebranding is towards the end of this council, but that's actually getting quite close now in terms of getting it sorted. So what I will be doing, though, as I said earlier, Chair, is I will be. We've got a few sort of significant things happening at the moment, not least the Rosemade playground and Keystone sort of moving on, and a few bits and pieces. So what I've been looking at was coming into the February and March cycles, was bringing back the priorities to say where we are, what's going on, what the members, clarifying where we are, what the proposals are. Juliet mentioned earlier about the trees in Rosemade Park, for instance, but there are a range of other things in there. Some of these are now ready to go in the timescales that they're not ready to go, they're ready to come back to the committee because other things have cleared. So they'll all come back. So if you put this into the priorities, it will come back to this committee as part of those priorities for us to discuss and make sure is moving forward. So you'll be monitoring those over the course of the next 12 months or so.
Okay, does that answer your question, Councillor Chase?
Perfect.
Good.
Wonderful. Thank you ever so much for asking that. Okay, so I think as there's no other questions coming up, just to clarify, what we're proposing basically is to not go through these questions tonight, for Peter to go through and send out and gather information to formulate, and it might be more than once, to formulate what we are definitely trying to achieve and for what reasons and what we want, including price and everything else that's on there. That it then feeds into part of our priorities, which comes under, sorry, not under, after the branding so that it's all very clear and slick. So over to the lovely Jules, who I'm hoping is nodding her head going, yes, she is, saying that was okay what I've just said. Thank you.
Yeah, that's noted, Chair. If
Thank you.
want me to just go through names, or
yeah, just to make sure that everyone is happy with that, because for this one it's quite a big item, and I know there's councillors that have been very passionate about this, and I support that. I think overall it's a great idea. I think we just need to get it in at the right moment so that we don't end up spending once to spend twice.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, Councillor Chase.
Yeah, agree.
Thank you. Councillor Malloy.
Agreed.
Councillor Tandy.
Agreed.
Councillor Turner.
Agreed.
Councillor Dr. Walsh.
Agreed.
And yourself, Chair.
Oh, I'm not sure. Yeah, agreed.
Thank you very much, Chair.
I have to make Jules sigh at some point during the meeting. Okay, in which case, thank you ever so much, everyone, for that. But I think we've dealt with that in a great way, and I do look forward to seeing what comes from this. So, and also, I look forward to the questions, Peter. So, moving on then to 7.6. Sorry, do I need to do anything else on that last item? I don't, do I?
No.
Okay, no. So moving on to 7.6. Community centre. So I'm going to move over to, pass over to Jules once again for an oral report on this.
Thank you very much, Chair. This follows on from the last full council meeting when council agreed to form the subcommittee on community centres to help inform the ongoing work for the development of the new centre in Wick and also the community centre in North Littlehampton. We convened an urgent meeting of the subcommittee at the beginning of December on the 3rd regarding the Keystone Centre, and that was because we had an update on the cost for that project. The minutes for that meeting will be published shortly, and a further update will be brought back in January. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Just for to note.
Just to check, does anyone have any questions? I don't think they do. Nothing's popped up. No. Okay, so all content to note that then. Thank you. Moving on to item 8 then, which is finance.
Billy, before you move on, Billy.
Oh, okay, sorry. Councillor Turner, yes.
Before we move on away from this particular officer's report, I forgot to say in the events bit to offer our congratulations and well done to the mayor and the events team for the Christmas lights switch on and all the other Christmas activities that have been taking place and are still to take place. They really deserve to have some recognition, and I forgot to include that when I said my my piece about events. So I'd my congratulations sent to that team again and to the mayor for all the Christmas events.
Here, quite right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair. Completely out of order, but we're very welcome. That's noted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so item 8 then, finance, which is on pages 39 to 41 of the agenda, and I shall pass over once again, poor Jules, to Juliet Harris.
Thank you, Chair. This is the periodic budget report that comes back to committee, which just gives a summary of your expenditure to date, really. It is to note, as there isn't anything in this report that really members aren't aware of, and indeed is just an update on the current position. The bigger conversation is probably in the next report for the draft budgets going forward, but if there are any questions, happy to take those, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any questions on this? No? Okay, in which case, before I have to say to note it, I would like to just thank everyone involved in these bits, because we're going through the budget cycle at the moment, and it is a big headache as well. And I'm sure I can say not happily, but say I know what Laura is like. She'll be there re-crunching numbers every 5 minutes. So big thank you to everyone who's involved in this. I've seen Peter appear on screen. Are you wanting to comment, Peter?
Only on the budget item, Chair.
Okay. What on 8.2 you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So for 8.1, we're all happy just to note that, yes?
Agreed.
Yeah. Lovely.
Agreed.
Okay, so moving on to 8.2 then, the committee budget proposals for 42 to 57, which I'm passing over to Peter.
Thank you, Chair. Members will have been through, new members will have been through this cycle previously. What happens with the creation of the budget is that obviously we've got trends, we've got that have happened during the year, there's inflationary factors, there are things that council has decided that they want to do, there are things that council decided they don't want to do. We pull that together, we discuss it in very informal terms with group leaders, with the mayor, with committee chairs and vice chairs, and we end up with what's come before you for each of the committees. Unusually, for this committee, there is almost nothing in that report that we haven't reported to you in one form or another previously. Be it through COVID pressures, be it through allotment rents, be it etc., the events programme, and so on. There is one very new element in there. It's not major and hopefully not contentious, which is a recommendation within it not to increase hiring charges for the facilities within the remit of this committee, principally Southfields. The reason being is that obviously our usage has taken a major hit and we need to encourage people back. So putting up prices at the moment is not going to help that particularly. So so that's rationale there. I could now go through each of these items, but you actually have heard nearly all of this before in one form or another, Chair. So if members are happy, I would rather answer questions, but I can do it if members so wish.
Okay, I'll just give members a moment just to put the queue on the screen if they do have any questions. I do have one myself, and it's the most weird one going. I don't know if other members have this, but on my papers on page 49, against holiday activity support, I have a red triangle, and I'm wondering if that is significant at all. And I know that is probably the most random question. However, I'm just wondering if there is any information about this triangle.
I think, Chair, it's somehow managed to come out on the printout, but I think it's just if you tap that, it's a tab.
Right, okay, that's fine. I just wanted to check in case it was to highlight something somewhere else.
No, it's not. It's not that, Chair.
What a shame. I thought I'd found some secret code.
I thought it was a little squashed insect on mine.
I did wonder if it was a little bit of tomato sauce when I was reading these earlier, but I checked and it definitely wasn't. So, okay, enough of that. I'll move on then. No one seems to be putting their queues up for questions, so I think we're all happy with that then. So on this, I think we just have to recommendations. Does anyone have any comments? No. So, sorry, recommendation. So to note the, so I'm just going to go through. Basically, you've got the recommendations there, which include to comment upon the draft committee budget, note the committee's earmarked reserve position, approve the retain the current charges for the Southfield Jubilee Centre room hire fees 2021 to 2022, as Peter just highlighted as well, and delegate authority to town clerk to apply a discount to long hour multiple bookings. Is everyone content to approve?
Agreed.
Anyone else?
Agreed.
Wonderful. I'm going to take that as agreed. So thank you ever so much, everyone.
Through you, Chair, just to thank members, and I will, obviously this comes back to policy and finance, then goes on to council. What I will say to members who are now thinking this budget stuff's easy, unfortunately the other two committees that are looming large might take a little bit more deliberation.
And I wish those committees well. So that, I believe, brings us into the exempt business, which is item 9. It's recommended that the public and accredited representatives of the press be excluded from the meeting under Section 100 of the Local Government Act of 1972 due to the confidential nature of the business to be conducted. So Do I have? Are we saying we need to get a seconder for this? Yes.
Yes,
Do I have a
please.
seconder? Right. So we've got a seconder in Councillor Walsh. So thank you. Can I thank all the staff for their support throughout the meeting and to the members of the public for their patience? And I'm now bringing this part of the meeting to a close at, where's my clock on screen? 19:47. Members will now adjourn for the meeting for a short period as we prepare for the second part of this meeting. Can I ask all members to leave this call and join the exempt meeting? I'll redeclare I will not be joining as previously stated. So I wish you all good night